So this week I went and saw Lynn Ramsey's latest film, You Were Never Really Here, with Joaquin Phoenix. I have been waiting to watch this movie for ages. I've been seeing it everywhere, all over the Instagram accounts that I follow and YouTube channels. I think it was released in America late last year, if I'm not mistaken, and we've only just got it in theatres here in Australia, so it has been a bit of a wait, but it was totally worth it because this movie is an absolute masterpiece. There's a lot to unpack in this movie. There's a lot of ambiguity, or things that seem ambiguous but they're actually not if you break down the little moments in the story. So today I wanted to do something different. I wanted to bring you guys a bit of an analysis video on what I interpret You Were Never Really Here to actually be about. I've never done one of these kinds of videos before, so hopefully it all goes to plan. Okay, let's do this.
It's okay, Joe. It's okay.
So the film opens with lead character Joe in a motel room. He's just committed a crime. We see his bloody hammer and a necklace with a female's name on it, and he burns a photo of the girl who likely owned that necklace. We don't get to see the violence that has occurred, but rather the aftermath, which is a common theme in this film, and there is a lingering question of whether Joe is the hero or the villain. He finds a payphone, calls someone to let them know the job is done, and returns home. When he arrives back to the house he shares with his elderly mother, we see a different side to the Joe that we have just been introduced to. He's kind, caring, and patient. His mother is the most important person in his life, and as we learn, is in fact the only person in his life. She mentions an ex-girlfriend to Joe that she believes would have made a good wife, and Joe responds that the woman she refers to was his girlfriend 20 years ago. We get the sense he hasn't had a relationship since. We also get a glimpse into Joe's tormented and broken mind. While at home with his mother, he wraps his head in plastic and slowly starts to suffocate himself, which brings him a weird sort of comfort. He lowers a knife into his throat in one scene, and drops it blade first at his feet in another, narrowly missing his toes. We also see flashbacks of Joe as a child, shirtless and doing the same thing with the plastic bag. Joe goes to meet store owner Angel to collect payment for his latest job. Angel's teenage son is there working, and Joe tells Angel how his son saw Joe entering his home, and now that his son knows where Joe lives, they cannot work together anymore. Angel tries to brush off the encounter, stating he's just a kid, he doesn't know what he saw, but Joe is insistent. He's fiercely protective of his mother, and isn't prepared to risk working with Angel again. As compensation for cutting ties, Joe gives Angel his cut of the latest job. Interestingly, of the wad of cash he has been paid, his cut only consists of a couple $100. This is important. I'll explain why shortly. Joe meets with John, the man who organises these jobs. But what is Joe's job? Initially, it seems as if he's some sort of hitman, but in fact he's actually a hired gun who is paid to retrieve kidnapped young girls from their captors. John's office is full of flowers, and when Joe comments on this, John explains the girl he saved most recently had parents who were florists. John tells him he has a new job for him. State Senator Albert Votto's teenage daughter has gone missing. Her mother committed suicide a number of years ago, and she has been running away frequently ever since. This time, she hasn't returned. The pay is $50,000, and John is excited that he will be able to get his luxury yacht out of storage with the money and take Joe sailing. Joe isn't listening. He stopped listening after John finished talking about the girl. This scene, combined with the prior scene involving Angel, gives us an important aspect to Joe's character. He isn't driven by money. John has a luxury boat. The $50,000 will help him get it back out on the water. And yet in the prior scene with Angel, Joe's cut of the money was only a couple $100, and he handed that over to Angel without the blink of an eyelid. So if Joe's motivation isn't money, what is it? The short answer is redemption. And to work out what he needs redemption from, we need to piece together what got Joe to where he is by paying attention to the flashbacks. There are three main series of flashbacks we see throughout the film, some slightly more prominent than others. The first, longest, and most important is Joe as a child, the second with Joe in the army, and the third where Joe is working as a government agent. In the first lot of flashbacks, we see young Joe dealing with a highly abusive father. His father carries a hammer, which he uses to abuse Joe's mother. He screams at Joe to sit up straight, and present-day Joe jerks upright as he remembers. In a particular flashback, Joe's mother lies terrified under a table as Joe watches on, helpless. In the flashback with Joe in the army, we repeatedly see someone lying in the sand, his foot twitching. Later, it's revealed Joe gave a young child a chocolate bar, only for another child to come and shoot him and take the candy for himself. The third flashback has a clean-shaven Joe working as a government agent, opening a truck to find it's full of young, dead girls. Likely these women were victims of sex trafficking. These flashbacks give us all of what we need to know about present-day Joe. He's deeply traumatized, damaged, and broken by a society filled with evil. He feels guilt over not being able to save his mother from abuse, and likely guilt over not being able to save the young woman in the van. He's overwhelmed by the world, which in his eyes is cruel and unforgiving. He drowns in the noises of day-to-day life, and he struggles to connect with people. He saves young girls for a living, and kills the captors in hopes it will provide a sense of inner harmony that will never come. Money doesn't drive Joe, a search for peace does. So Joe goes off to find Senator Votto's daughter Nina, who Votto advises is in a building used as a brothel for underage girls. He knows this as he has received an anonymous tip. Joe heads to the building and captures an errand boy he sees leaving. The boy tells him how many people are guarding the building, where they are, and provides him the PIN code to get in. Joe doesn't hurt the boy, but rather ties him up and leaves him in the car. The kid has not been abusing girls, so he remains unharmed. Joe goes into the building, takes out all the guards, and rescues Nina. He drives to the agreed meeting place, where he is to give Nina back to her father, but Votto never arrives. Joe heads to a motel to figure out what to do next, and while he is there, Nina puts on the TV as a news report comes on, stating Albert Votto has committed suicide by jumping off a building. Corrupt police officers arrive at Joe's door, killing the motel front desk worker to gain access. One takes Nina away, while the other attempts to kill Joe, instead shooting through his cheek. Joe gets the upper hand and kills the officer himself. Confused, Joe tries to contact John, who isn't answering, and arriving at his office, finds he has been murdered. We see that so have Angel and his son. Joe panics, realizing they've likely discovered where he lives, and rushes home before they can get to his mother. When he gets home, it's too late. His mother has been shot and killed while lying in bed. The cops are still in the house, downstairs waiting for Joe. He sneaks in through the window and gets the jump on them, killing one and mortally wounding the other. Joe approaches the cop, who has made his way to the kitchen and lies dying on the floor. Joe gives him a painkiller and asks who killed his mother and how did she die. The cop responds that it was the other man who killed her, and that she was sleeping when she died. The cop also tells Joe why they took the girl. Senator Votto and Governor Williams were running a sex trafficking ring with underage girls. The cop laments at how he always hears the girls crying. Nina was Governor Williams' favourite. Senator Votto had decided he wanted out, and sent Joe to get Nina back. The anonymous text didn't exist. Votto knew Nina was at the address because he was the one running the operation. Williams found out, and worried that this could become public, had him murdered, making it look like a suicide to cover his tracks. It's not explicitly stated, but I think this is why Nina's mother committed suicide, as she found out what was going on but was powerless to stop it. What happens next was my favourite scene in the entire movie. The man is lying on the floor, his breath shallow. Joe lies next to him as I've Never Been to Me comes on the radio. They lie side by side, quietly singing, and the cop reaches out to hold Joe's hand. He doesn't push the cop's hand away, but embraces it. The song lyrics state, "Won't you share a part of a weary heart that has lived a million lives?" In this moment, Joe relishes the opportunity to connect with someone who might just understand his inner demons. Not entirely, but maybe just a little. Joe puts on his best suit, wraps his mother's body in a black garbage bag, and takes her to a secluded lake. With her dead, Joe has nothing more to live for. He fills his pockets with rocks, and takes her body into the water, sinking along with her. As he starts to drown, he suddenly sees a vision of Nina in place of his mother. He realizes he does have something to live for, and removes the rocks, swimming back to the surface. Drenched, he makes his way to Governor Williams' estate in order to save one last girl. Joe arrives at the estate and makes his way through the large house, killing the guards as he goes. He arrives in Governor Williams' room to find he is already dead, his throat slit. Joe breaks down crying. He rips off his shirt and sits on the ground, defeated. I've seen people interpret his upset as Joe being mad that he didn't have the opportunity to kill Governor Williams himself, but that's not how I read this scene. The way I interpreted it was that Joe has realized that Nina has killed the governor, and is therefore doomed to be like Joe, having now lost any remaining innocence that she may have had, and he cries because he feels like she has now become another person he has been unable to save. In the flashbacks to when Joe was a boy and witnessed the violence against his mother, he was shirtless, and I think he rips off his shirt here because he's reliving the trauma and is reverting back to the state he was in that moment. Joe heads downstairs and sees Nina sitting at a table, her hands covered in blood, eating dinner. She appears almost in a trance, the razor blade she used to kill the governor lying on the table next to her. I think her trance-like state is a coping mechanism to deal with the trauma, as she is in a similar state when Joe first rescues her from the brothel. In the closing scene, Nina and Joe head to a diner for a meal. Nina asks Joe where they are going next. He pauses and finally replies he doesn't know. Nina gets up to go to the bathroom, and Joe's mind lingers on what he has just said. He saved the girl, but what does he do next? He still hasn't found the resolution he has been so desperate for. With Nina no longer in his view, he starts to lose sight of his reason to live. The mundane noises of the world around him swell. Overwhelmed, and as lost as he has ever been, he begins to cry. He fantasizes about taking a gun and shooting himself. A nearby waitress gets splashed in his blood and yet doesn't notice. This symbolizes how unimportant and invisible he feels in this world. Nina returns to the table and says, "Let's go, Joe. It's a beautiful day." And after a brief hesitation, Joe realizes she's right and echoes her.
It is a beautiful day.
And so there you have it, friends, my interpretation of You Were Never Really Here, which at its core is about a man who is suffering severe PTSD after a life of violence and sadness, finally finding a connection with somebody and therefore something worth living for, even if the moment does feel quite fleeting. As you can probably tell, I really enjoyed this movie. I love that Lynn Ramsay gave the audience very little exposition. There is next to no talking in this movie at all, and instead she trusted her audience to piece together their own interpretation of this film. What did you guys think of the film and my analysis? Is there anything that you think that I've missed or that you have your own interpretation on? Let me know in the comment section below. A huge thank you for watching this video as well. I really enjoyed doing something different today, so I truly appreciate you watching it. You guys are the best. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys here for the next one.